regret. There are no reports to be read.
Are there any motions on notice?
There are no motions on notice.
Are there any motions not on notice?
There are no motions not on notice.
All right. Madam Librarian.
The time for questions is now open.
Madam Librarian.
The time for questions is now closed.
All right. Madam President. Are there any new fines?
There are no new fines.
Brilliant. All right. In that case, I call this House to order, and I should now like to call on our Secretary to read the minutes of the last public business meeting. The question before the House this evening is, this House regrets free will. And I should now like to call on the first speaker, Marie, to propose the motion to the House.
Honourable guests, thank you so much for having me here tonight. A little bit about me. I'm currently an Erasmus student. I'm actually finding myself on Erasmus, having a great time. So thank you so much to the Hist for inviting me back. I will invoice you my flight back. Here, opening tonight, talking about free will. We've freed the nip. We've freed the will. Probably going to free the willy. That's not tonight. Tonight we're talking about free will. Who is she? Well, free will, I suppose the antonym for determinism. This idea that everything is predestined, and that you don't have to worry about anything because someone has a plan for you. Free will is the opposite. It tells you, don't worry about it. You can do whatever you want. You got into Trinity, you worked so hard, you got your points, you're now the goat. It's amazing. You now get to saunter along by the arts block, wearing your baggy jeans, a little scarf, you talk about philosophy. I'm so happy someone goes, oh, you went to Trinity. Don't worry, you're in Trinity. But, anyways, you have free will. And we can't deny that it exists, you know. But is it a good thing? I'm going to say no. And I hope you will believe the same afterwards. Now, one thing about me is I'm a little reserved, introverted, I hate attention, and gosh, I fucking hate the language. I've been gone out of the country for a week and it's cursing. Anyways, I hate the language, guys. It's horrible. However, my friends might think that way. Secretly, I have made a few mistakes. Sometimes I get myself into the drama. Sometimes I do rock the boat a little bit. And free will is amazing when you want to test the waters. That's what it's built for. It's like your best friend who goes, yeah, go on, wear that outfit. No, it looks bad on you. They should have told you it looked bad on you. They go, no, wear it, go out, do the cocaine, do whatever. They don't worry about the consequences because free will, you're your own person. There is no safeguarding, there was no protection, there's no care or love, no brawl. Well, that is exactly what free will is. There is this imbalance in free will between when you experience something from free will, there is this utter imbalance in the ratio between lessons learned and the extreme emotions faced. Now, as I said, I hate attention, but there are a few instances, this copybook is full of reasons where I have made a mistake or two. But just to begin, let me tell you when my bestie, free will, said, you do it, don't worry about the consequences. So I did this thing called skulls. Does anyone know what skulls is? Now, if you were there at training one day, and you were waiting to hear my name called out, oh boy, you were very disappointed. I was disappointed. Well, free will said, you go girl, you do skulls. You're gonna get it, don't worry about it. So I worked my little tush off, I spent all Christmas studying. Training one day came around. I saw the scores. I got 7 in law, 5 people got skulls, guys. 5 people got skulls, so 2 places away. Needless to say, I was distraught, and I tanked my exams the next day. Now, this is not a pity party. I mean, Alexa, play What Was I Made For by Billie Eilish. I'm not upset, guys. I'm really, really not upset. Did I learn? Yes, I learned quite good in studying, you know, and I can work hard. But did that lesson outweigh the deep upset that I felt? Because the next day, when I was supposed to learn off all these case names, the only thing that was in my mind were the lyrics for I Love You, I'm Sorry by Gracie Abrams for a full 2 hours. That's just the way life goes, guys. Anyways, why am I telling you this? Well, firstly, I want the records to be known that Bereavement did get set in law. So thank you very much. Now, as we saunter on, I'll tell you about another Trinity experience. Oh, have you ever heard, very original idea, you know, you're in Trinity, you have a will they, won't they, normal people like Marianne, like Connell, especially in second year. Anyways, free will says, you know what, don't care about impressing someone. You are fun yourself. You are the full meal. Anyways, I'm outside Chapman's after a very long day boring land law, this and that, my stupid electives, and I'm having a little drink, a little smoke, and it's great. And the guy I really like is right in front of me. And I think, do you know what? My glass of Sauvignon Blanc is empty. What am I going to do? I was there, by the way. I decided, let's impress him. No, let's not impress him. Forget it. I have free will, so I have the glass. And in my German state, I go, oh, it's the ground. I just outside Chapman's. You know, here was me going, will they, won't they? They most definitely didn't. Anyways, let's then talk about a very recent event. As I told you, I'm on Erasmus. Am I finding myself? Yes, I am. Ich lerne die Deutsche. And I've been taking up calisthenics, guys. I'm taking the context. Watch this thing. Watch this thing. Anyways, I'm in this beautiful ancient city. It's actually the Oxford of Germany, in Heidelberg, if anyone knows it. It's gorgeous. Anyways, I decided, free will's here with me. I don't have any other friends just yet. I've made friends now, don't worry. But anyway, the first week I thought, I don't have anyone. Who cares? Free will's with me. Free will, my best friend, who says, yeah, go for it, who's secretly shifting your ex in the back of the corner. I'm almost finished now. But anyways, I'm in this new city. No, I don't know it. No, I'm not aware that Germans are vicious when it comes to cycling. However, I wouldn't say anything else bad about the Germans. Recently, they doubled their expenditure when for military arms for the first time since World War II, so I'm going to be very nice. Anyways, I'm cycling, and I'm up against these vicious cyclists, and suddenly I have to go a little further. I have to go a little quicker. I gotta keep up. That's just the way the city works. And I have my music playing, it's nice. I've actually brought it down a little bit. I'm off calisthenics, as I said, and I'm wearing a tank top and short shorts, so I look like a woke Kermit the Frog cycling. Anyways, unfortunately I'm not tall enough to be a German, and I didn't actually see the red light above the yield sign. The whole world flashed before my eyes as I saw a trove of people crossing the street. And then the next thing I saw, a lady's on the floor. Yes, I may indeed strike an old lady. Or else it's like finding yourself, where's free will? She wasn't there. Anyways, the lady's fine. I am in court next Tuesday. But you know what? Free will was there for the ride. It was great. It was fun. No accountability. So for that reason, I ask that you pass this motion. Thank you so much.
Before I begin, I just want to say that this speech was not written with free will or the knowledge that an actual reverend would be with us tonight. And if I did write this with free will, I now regret it. Anyway, it all began like 1 billion years ago with a brother and a sister in a garden. I imagine it went something like this. Ooh, this apple looks so nice and juicy. I think I might take a bite. And then Adam snatched the apple out of his hand and went, and then God was like, get out right now. So he banished them from his orchard. Why? Because he gave them free will, and then they just totally went nuts with it. Eating all his apples, he gave them free will, and then he realized, oh no, wait, these guys are actually crazy. So he kicked them out of the Garden of Eden, and with them the rest of humanity. After getting banished from the garden, can you guess what the second thing these siblings did with their free will after eating the big guy's apples? That's right, an act no one here is familiar with. They had sex. And here we are. Now, admittedly, we've come a long way since then, but I kind of judge God for leaving us alone. One day, one of our ancestors was just out in the woods, banging some sticks and stones and shit together, and then one just accidentally burst into flames. This is how we discovered fire. In a world where this can happen, who thought it was a good idea to leave us alone? The world is a scary, scary place. No, thank you. I'm too stuck on time. And today it is even scarier. Because today we have things like stock markets, Labubu's, violence grows. Have you ever looked at a Labubu in the eye? Of course you haven't. You've been too scared. But if you had, you would have seen in the black sheen of those plastic eyes, your own reflection staring back at you. The Labubu is a modern mirror of ourselves. Self-reflection. It's a cause, maybe, even for some regret. But now, before I get into the real juicy fruit of this argument, I want to talk a bit I think this notion can be interpreted in a number of ways. Either that we regret free will, or what we've done with it, the concept of it, or the very notion that it exists. But I don't think in this debate these distinctions really matter. What matters is not that free will exists, but that at least the concept of it does. And it's a concept which most people today buy into. Most of us believe that regardless of the extent to which certain factors influence the way we behave, for the most part, we, or our brains, have the capacity to decide things like, I will go down this street instead of this one, or I will butcher the story of Adam and Eve in front of a real-life reverend instead of staying at home and not offending anyone. And I'm not going to get bogged down in all the philosophical arguments that accompany all this, like what chain of events led me to be on the street in the first place, or if I drank one less Jaeger bomb at the Low Night Out Cruise, would I be standing in front of you all right now demanding your attention? Because these are not the intricacies I want to discuss. What matters in this debate is that regardless of whether free will actually exists, the concept of it does. Most of us believe that we have it. And as long as we believe this, we should also believe in regret. The feeling of sadness, repentance, or disappointment over something that one has done or failed to do. And as humans, we have a lot to regret. Our history is horror, and of course we have to live with it in the present. If we ignore the past, then to quote James Baldwin, we are criminals. We should express regret for the acts we've committed in the name of free will. But this 7-minute allocated speaking time is not the place for me to give you a rap sheet on the horrible things we've done to each other and our product over the course of our being here. I'll save that speech for the film. Instead, I'm going to do what we all do. Zoom in on myself and examine my own personal history and tell you about some things I regret doing with my free will. Number 1, participate in a slam poetry competition. Number 2, reach semi-finals of said slam poetry. Number 3, admit to slam poetry competition in front of Hist. Number 4, brag about reaching semi-finals of slam poetry in front of Hist. Number 5, agree to go on a date with guy I met at slam poetry competition. Number 6, went on date with a guy who did slam poetry. Number 7, hurt the feelings of a guy who did slam poetry. Number 8, become the subject of a slam poem. Now, I can see all of the endless other seats dying to hear this slam poem, so I'll just quickly paraphrase it. Eve, because my name's Eve, I wish I could be the Adam to your Eve. We must believe, from that date in Weatherspoons, I didn't want to leave. It felt like magic. This is tragic. Why did my name have to be Greg? And then the audience would go like this. Anyway, so I not only regret some things I've done with my free will, I also regret having the concept of it. Not only because this means that I have no one else to blame for my actions but myself, although bear with me because I'm looking into it, I will find someone, but also because I think that the concept of free will has not always served us well. And if you don't believe me, just look around. Look where it has got us. You've all chosen to be here. Anyway, when we think of ourselves as each possessing free will, we think of ourselves in very individual terms. The concept allows us to assume that all our actions are entirely our own and not affected by a wide number of external factors that set so many other things into motion. The concept allows us to ignore the intersectionality of events in the universe and the fact that we live in an ecosystem. Maybe whatever created us gave us free will because they didn't want to be held responsible for our actions. God saw the finance bros, the boo-boo buyers, and slam poets of the world and said, that is all them. And perhaps in some ways we do the same to each other. We think, that was all that person, it's got nothing to do with me. But if we think of ourselves not as agents with free will, and rather as members of a system in which all our actions collide with and affect one another, maybe then we can bear a greater responsibility for our collective conduct as a species. And just remember, you are never as far away as you would like to believe from becoming the subject of a slam poem.
I would like to thank Darcy for a very, very fun speech, and
not invited here. This is my third time here. That's like, the reference to Adam and Eve I enjoyed, because when I was a little fellow, my grandfather was a great gardener, and he had this apple tree that had never had fruit. Until one year, it produced one apple. And we were warned not to pull the apple under any circumstances. And I didn't. I just couldn't bite it. And I thought, that was an exercise in free will I regret. I just want to say, first of all, the idea of free will, to be serious for a moment, it's not an absolute gift. There are all sorts of constraints on it. If you think at our conception, an enormous amount of information is transmitted that we aren't even aware of. But if you look into your life as you grow up, you begin to be shaped by all sorts of influences, your mother, your father, your home, your parents, your friends, your school. Gradually, you begin to gather a certain amount of information that becomes a factor in your life. And very soon, you begin to say, I don't go along with this. Any parent knows about the 2-year-old tantrums. And I've got 3 children, and I've seen 3 times. They hit about 2 years old, and then they suddenly have a mind of their own. They say the most dangerous being in the world is a 2-year-old with a nuclear bomb. They're impressionable. So you have that, and then they should go on into teenage years. Now, none of you have rebelled against your parents, I'm sure. Of course you all have. They're probably at home now, which they've seen themselves, well, get a haircut or all this sort of stuff that parents go on. But that's the reality. We're beginning to assert ourselves and look for our own identity, despite all the things that control and influence us as we develop. St. Paul, I have to go by the truth. St. Paul said so, the good that I would, I do not do. I do the very things I hate. And I get great consolation from that, because we all have those moments when we've done things that we regret. So the other speakers have mentioned. But that's part of finding our own identity, who we are, experimenting and growing up. I want to tell you a story about, I worked in St. Patrick's Cathedral for 7 years, and my job was all around the Liberties. And we had lots of winos knocking on the rectory door on Lower Avenue. And one day, I'm walking up from the rectory towards Dalton's Park to the post office. And I met this wino I knew, and it was a hot summer's day. And he had just a brown tweed jacket, nothing underneath, just a jacket. And terrible trousers and broken shoes. He asked me for money. And I told him, because we just never gave him money, we gave him vouchers for the hospitals, and food, tea, and our water at our doors, but never money. And I wouldn't give him money. And he told me to F off. I've heard more F words than all of you put together. It's part of the job working in the inner city. Anyway, I went on to the post office, and now I'm coming back, and I meet him going the opposite direction. Only this time, he's in a beautiful snow-white polo shirt, under a brown jacket, new tracksuit bottoms and tracksuits. Again, he asked me for money. I said no. He told me to F off, and let him go. And anyway, off he went. When I got home, turned the key in the front door, and as I always did, I'd say, I'm back! And Helen's voice would come from somewhere upstairs or wherever she was in the house. She came to the top of the stairs and she said, while you were out, the poor man called here, and he was in such a terrible state, I gave him a polo neck shirt with That's absolutely true. And there he was cursing at me from inside my shirt. But 3 dimensions of free will, or lack of it. First of all, I exercise my free will to do what I call is best for him. He, because he had become an addict, he'd lost his free will when it came to the problem of alcohol. He once had free will, but, and I'm not saying passing any moral judgment on him, because there are all sorts of factors believes these things are complex. But he no longer had free will. He had to drink, desperate for drink. My wife, dealing with the same situation, exercised her free will. She's motivated by compassion, and her decision was to give me my clothes. So, that's the complexity of it. And we all have these problems of dealing with situations, knowing what the right thing to do is. And you can have two different things done there, three different things done there, and they're all right in their own way. And one of the things that occurs to me in this, in the back of our minds, I would have thought, might be the question of artificial intelligence. Because some people are worried that this might very well impact on our capacity to exercise free will. And I, as somebody who has a spiritual dimension to my life, I don't think that can happen, by the way. I believe there's a spiritual intelligence, moral authority out there that is beyond our understanding. That's my view. And I mean, the idea of the big old man with white beard and a big chair in the skies is rubbish. But the presence of God's Spirit is very real to me, so I don't think AI can ever take over. It could do a lot of damage. But I want to give you an example of how I think these dealing with technology that's impersonal is very difficult. When I came back to Dublin in 1975, telephone answering machines were just coming into fashion. So on my record there would be a telephone message. Well, I have to check the number here. Oh yeah, this is 751935. Canon Lily is not available to take your call. Please leave your name, telephone number, and he will contact you as soon as possible. If this is an emergency, and then there was another call. There's a couple in the telephone kiosks. Do you remember what they were? You know, had the excitement of using a telephone. Maybe one or two of us here might know that you had to press button A when you want to connect to the call, or if you want to turn money back to press button B. But anyway, this pair in the telephone kiosk, and they ring my number, and the message goes out. And the girl says, he says he's not at home. And there's silence in the background. You can almost hear the fellow's brain. And then he says, what did he say? Says he's not at home. How could he say he's not at home? I said, that's what he said. Being Ned Shuttleman and Steve Hughes are being stupid. So he puts another shilling, as it was in those days, into the phone and he dials my number. And of course gets the same message. He says, Jesus, he says. He says he's not at home. I told you. And then he says, she said, it says something about an emergency. He says, this is an effing emergency. They want to change the date of the wedding. But the point I'm making is, they were trying to deal with something that couldn't respond to them. There was nothing there, just a technological piece of equipment. And I feel that we're losing that in society. If you ring a bank now and get this woman, I'd be dead. Of course, there's nothing there. And you get these endless numbers and these, help me with your problem, and all this sort of stuff. And you don't have a right word to go around with it. I think people are desperate for communication. And here's my main argument for supporting and valuing free will. I think it's the space in which we discover our own personal selves. We establish our identity. We have all those other constraints we've inherited, whether it's church going or not church, whether it's doing classics or doing medicine. All those things that have shaped us into a certain being. But free will allows me to establish my own identity as Gordon Liddy. And I was talking over dinner about my lovely wife that I met when I was 19. We were married for 51 years before she died. And I think free will allowed me in that relationship to discover who I really am, especially when she got in. And I have often said to people, I discovered qualities in myself when I nursed her for the last 20 years of her life. because I didn't believe I could have the level of compassion and goodness to give up everything. I retired early to do for her what needed to be done. So in that, I established my identity as a person to my own satisfaction. And since she died, I've had the Ukrainian family staying with me, and I just feel so enriched by those. I'm not saying this for you all say, I'm saying this to say how you become enriched when you exercise your free will in a certain way and are blessed to have somebody to love and to care for in your life. There's a lovely word in the marriage service, which Thomas Cranmer, by the way, who gave us the Book of Common Prayer, he talked about, he inserted a word in his marriage service, not just to love, but to love and to cherish. And I discovered the full meaning of that word, looking after my wife. To cherish her as she became frail. She once was a model, very beautiful young woman. Now she's disabled and in a wheelchair. But nonetheless, the person I married was not just a physical, good-looking model. It was her, and it was her, and we connected. And in that, we were both enriched. And I believe, above all, free will allows you and me to that space to shape my own identity and, please God, my legacy. I oppose the motion.
And I can't conceive of it because if there was no free will, there's no way I could even envision think physical freedom is fine. We're in this room, we're not like in chains, many people are. So we have a level of physical freedom. We have intellectual freedom in that we like respond to motives and make choices and don't like act completely blindly like machines. But moral freedom is quite tricky. I find it very hard to argue that we could have chosen otherwise in the same set of circumstances. Like, whenever I make a choice, I actually can't imagine making a different choice. And it actually becomes necessary that I made the choice in the world that I live in. There's some randomness in science, like heat and stuff. You know science and stuff, so yeah, okay. I don't really care about that. I can't tell you what free will is. I don't think anybody's really defined it. I don't really think anyone can. Yeah, as far as I know, yeah, no way to know, really. For example, I really wouldn't know what it would have looked like not speaking in this debate, though I sure wish I did. That is a joke. No, everyone laugh. Thank you. The point is, we probably at least have the freedom to do what we will. I think it's easier to believe in free will because we don't like the consequences of a world without free will, where there's no responsibility or agency. Like, if we all accepted there was no free will, Cassidy would have never gotten his due for rape. And if no one believed they had free will, we could never have the opportunity to reflect on our choices or actions. And also the motion says that we have free will, so I'm okay with that. Thank you, the Hist. The reason I regret free will is because I'm so annoyed by people pretending they don't have free will and then not engaging in responsibility. How many times have I listened to my friend? Let's call this friend Quinn Katsoglu, for example. On about how he's with a guy, and the guy's crazy, and he's so upset, and he's so confused, and blah, 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 when he literally has free will, and he can tell this nice man, hey, you're kind of mean, and I'm going to leave out and hang out with my friend Parker, who is also very smart and gorgeous. Actually, also, side note, Quinn was too scared of responsibility to let me use the real example, so let that sink in. Truly, it is maybe our greatest desire to completely absolve ourselves of all the responsibilities tied to our actions. My dad's a great example of this. If I'm like, hey dad, this guy was mean to me, he'll be like, you don't know their story. You don't know their life. Maybe having a bad day. And I'm just like, they're a fucking asshole, come on. Even politically we get responsibility, like Nazis or ICE agents just following orders. This is a very serious example. Those who willingly join violent and extreme groups that systematically destroy others and pretend their free will doesn't exist in a select set of circumstances, or when people refuse to oppose an ongoing genocide and say that it's because of the community they're a part of and their special situated situation, or me pretending I didn't willingly agree to be in this debate and argue that we ought to regret free will, something that is either completely impossible to regret or approve of, or necessary for the existence of the possibility of regret. I'm sick of it. We selectively pick and choose where free will is, if we have it, and we don't use it. And we only believe it like when we feel like we've done it. Meek never accepted that he lost his beef to Cassidy. He just slinked away and made nice to Diddy, then backtracked after the arrest and was like, well, I was swept up in the rap world. Okay. Not to mention, we don't even accept apologies when people do accept responsibility. If Meek was like, hey, yeah, I went to those shady parties, I'm really sorry, I'm a different man, we would all be like, fuck you, Meek, go away. So yeah, free will allows us to feel regret, but we don't do anything about it. So why even have free will in the first place if we don't even engage with regret? That's all for me. Thank you so much.
Because it's not real, we don't have it, and it's toxic and bad to think that we have it. And you might think, well, after hearing some of the speakers in the room, that no one can deny we have free will. denied it. The rule says that there's no difference between worlds where we have free will and we don't have it. Which I don't. Sorry, I know I'm not supposed to agree with the guys on this. But there are people out there who deny that we have free will, including some scientists, including my nemesis, Robert Sapolsky. Robert Sapolsky is a neuroscientist at Stanford, and he and I both wrote books about free will from a standpoint of neuroscience, and came to the exact opposite conclusions, and they were published within a weekend. So we've been having back and forth for a couple of years since that. So Robert's view is that we have no free will because of some of the elements that Gordon talked about, where all of human evolution has shaped human nature, our genetics shapes our own nature, the way our brain develops, and all of the experiences that have happened to us, with that phrasing, have happened to us through our lives, just shape our brains, physically configure our brains in a certain way, so that at any moment, when we're faced with some scenario, some situation in which we apparently have to choose between some options, in fact, our brain just churns through the algorithm and spits out one answer. And it was always going to be that answer. There never really was any choice. We were just determined to act out our programming at any moment. And so Robert thinks, first of all, that neuroscience shows that that's true, because you can show there are influences on our brains and on our decisions from our genetics and from experiences we've had. And you can look into people's brains and see the cogs turning when they're making a decision. And it looks like the brain is making a decision. The person's not doing anything. So you're just being pushed around by events that are happening inside you like a robot. He also thinks that it's a terrible idea that we think we have free will. And the reason for that is that we hold people responsible for their actions, more responsible than they actually are. So his view is that because of all these factors, because of all these constraints, nobody has any control over anything that they do. And as a consequence, it's wrong to blame them. It's wrong to praise them. It's wrong to reward or punish them for anything that they've done. And really what he's railing against from an American point of view is the American meritocracy, the myth of the meritocracy. This idea that, you know, if I've succeeded, it's because I've worked hard, I tried really hard, and I've gotten ahead in life, and I deserve what I've got. And the proof that I deserve what I've got is that I've got it. It's just a circular sort of argument. And if you don't have it, you must not have worked hard. There's nothing about systemic injustice or unfairness in society. It's just down to you. You didn't work hard. You didn't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Therefore, you deserve what you get or what you don't get. So, his view, I think, is that free will isn't real, and the concept is toxic, and it's just a club that we use to beat people. And I think I have some sympathy for the idea. I completely agree that the meritocracy is a myth in that sense. But I completely disagree that we don't have any free will whatsoever. And it's not the case that science shows that. So we can see a framework for thinking about how we control our actions that takes account of our genetics and the way our brain is wired, and the situations we find ourselves in, and still allows that there are some options open to us that we still choose between. Something is up to us as individual agents. And one of the arguments that's often trotted out in free will debates is that free will is set against determinism. You already heard this mentioned. And there's a few kinds of aspects of that. One is this sort of psychological determinism. Our brain is just a certain way, we're just going to play that out. But there's a deeper threat, which is actually just from physics. So the idea that there's a scientific worldview, that everything that goes on is ultimately down to physics. And physics just says things will work out in a certain way, and it's just deterministic, there's no option. Turns out physics doesn't say that at all, actually. It's a common misconception. Physics says, actually, the world is indeterminate at really, really low levels, at quantum level, and even at sort of microscopic levels more generally. So what does that mean for free will? What it means is, it sounds like it doesn't help. It sounds like either things are determined by the atoms moving around the way they're going to be, and I didn't choose anything, or they're determined by random shit happening in my brain, and I still didn't choose anything. But actually, the fact that the lowest levels are undetermined, there's a little bit of looseness, many things could happen, just based on physics, means that the way the system is organized can control what happens. There's some causal slack in the system for organization to have an effect. That's why my phone is organizing the way the electrons are running around here, is it's running this program right. So you can get that kind of causation. That's the kind of causation that we have as living beings. We're organized in a way that when we're faced with an open future, we can exert causal control to determine what happens and make happen what we want to. So scientifically, it's perfectly fine to think that we actually have free will within constraints. It's not absolute, as Gordon said. It wouldn't make any sense. What would it even be to have absolute free will and do just anything? Well, why would you do just anything? What we want is to do things for our reasons and keep doing things for our reasons that come along with being ourselves. So being ourselves just means keep doing you through time. That's the main thing. So there's this view then that first of all, I would say free will is real, and then secondly, I'd say it's not bad. It's not a bad concept to have. You can say, people have accused me, you just say this, you must just like blaming people. Like, everyone likes blaming. We spend loads of our time blaming people, right? And you can flip the script there a little bit, and rather than using this negative word blame, you can use a more positive word like accountability. Accountability is exactly what lets us have human society. That's what civilization is based on, is holding each other accountable for things. So we say, it's not right to hold people responsible, responsibility is terrible. Well, responsibilities and rights are a package deal. Your responsibility is my rights. So the very foundation of our society and civilization is based on us making decisions and holding each other accountable for those decisions. Now, that's the first sort of interpretation, that we should regret it because it doesn't exist and it's bad. The second interpretation is that we should regret it because it does exist and it's bad. So we've heard already that the burden of choice, right? This idea that, yes, we have free will, and it's awful. We have to make decisions all the time. It's exhausting. We have this huge sort of psychological burden of making decisions that are stressful and anxiety-inducing. And it's interesting to ask why. Like, why does it sometimes feel like, oh God, I have to decide this thing. I have this choice and I don't know what to do and I'm conflicted. And it's stressful. The reason it's stressful is because we know if we make the wrong choice, we're going to feel bad. We're going to regret it. Right? Because that's how we learn how to make good choices. So, when we think about how we come to decide what to do, we can think in a moment, in any moment right now, we have some options and we can weigh them up and figure out what's likely going to be the outcome of these different actions that I might take, which one is going to turn out well, and then we make a choice. But that's not the end of it. Because we have a self and we learn from our experience, then the next time we are in that situation, we remember what happened the time before. So if the outcome was good or bad, if it was good, we will reinforce that action. If it was bad, we will feel regret. That's how we learn. So regret is a key component of our free will. It's because we're making choices that we should regret them and learn from them. And it's not just that we regret past things. It's not just a retrospective kind of emotion. It's a prospective one. A lot of the time, we're making decisions based on anticipatory regret. We think, I could do this or this. If I do that, if I go home with that guy, I'm going to regret it. If I buy that pair of jeans and bring them home, I'm going to regret that. I'm not as brave outside as I thought I was in the shop. So that anticipatory regret allows us to judge the possible outcomes of actions that we might take in a simulation, just simulated in our minds, and we don't have to try them out in the world. So that's what Karl Popper calls letting our hypotheses die in our stead. So not only do I not regret free will, either because we don't have it or because we do have it, I also don't regret regret. Thank you.
enemies, lovers. We've heard a lot about free will. I'm going to try and use my right now to say also marriage for this because my name is pronounced Tommy, and I thought we were friends. But that's okay. I want to say I'm really glad that everyone else was confused about the notion. I too was confused about the notion coming from an unfortunate debate background. The rules of British parliamentary debate say that for this House regrets motion, the proposition speakers need to characterize a counterfactual, which is a fancy way of saying you have to explain what the world would look like without free will and why it's better that way. Unfortunately, I think that's the world we're living in now, and it's shit, which doesn't look good for my side of the debate. And as Harper so helpfully pointed out, nobody has really defined free will in this debate. I'm not going to try. And I don't know if that's going to be good or bad for you. It's not really up to me. And yeah, I, like some of the other speakers, don't really think we as people actually have free will to use this debate. I don't have free will because if I did, I would be the fourth speaker and I could be drunk right now. Actually, I could still have a drunk right now, but then I'd be taking away your free will to enjoy the debate. Sorry. No, I mean you're welcome. Yeah, everyone that I've talked to recently has said that as a recent graduate of this fine institution, actually, I have all this free will. They all want to know what I'm doing with my life now that I'm out of college. But I think that if I really had free will, I would have a job. Maybe get a boyfriend, EU citizenship. And not to be the dead horse, but when I do make decisions of my own free will, they lead to catastrophic situations. I think a few of you know what I'm talking about. Like that time I was crying in a nightclub in Copenhagen, or that time I was crying in a hostel in Copenhagen, broad daylight. Well, a knockoff version of the Joker, water on me, growling about this. Or one time I was crying in a bush outside of Copenhagen Business School. I take full responsibility for my actions, but also I think if I truly had free will, I wouldn't have been in those situations because I could have avoided the decisions that led me there in the first place. But that's enough about me and my unresolved situationships. Let me explain why the world seems impossible. Even without rapists and child pornographers and anyone else who's taking away the rights of others, a world with free will is impossible because our actions as humans are inherently bound to the way that we were raised and our own biological processes. And I'm not talking about gender essentialism or whatever. I'm talking about the microbiota gut-brain axis. How can anybody believe they have free will when their minds are so largely influenced by literal billions of bacteria just fucking around in their digestive tracts? And those bacteria, they aren't even sentient. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know why they're doing it. That's free will for you. Lucky now. Anyway, to win this debate, I have to first convince you that people have free will, and that a world without free will would be a better one. But I think that we've all made up our minds about free will. So I want to hopefully explain to you why this concept in the world we live in today merits regret. People have convinced themselves they have free will. Even worse, some people have convinced themselves that it's an unalienable right. And I'm speaking, of course, of the great people of my home country, the United States of America. And I have to focus on this because, first of all, I'm self-centered. Every time I open the New York Times app to do crossword, I'm faced with a new atrocity committed by the government that's fueled by the people of the country I'll probably have to go into when my visa expires. Side note, please marry me if you're Irish. Freedom, and I think it's fair to kind of conflate the definitions of freedom and free will here, because freedom is in our Constitution and our national anthem and the Pledge of Allegiance we say every morning in school. It's really creepy. Freedom and democracy are American ideals that are taught to every citizen from the time they're 5 years old, and these are worthwhile ideals. I would never say they're not. I'd never try to take them away from anyone, but there are everyday citizens who use these ideals to justify the right to own machine guns because they think the liberals are trying to take away their right to own machine guns because they think that's a fundamental freedom they're supposed to have. Everyday citizens use these ideals to justify violence against when these citizens are called out for the harm they've caused, they defend themselves by claiming they're just exercising their freedom of speech. They think that freedom and free will means doing whatever they want without a constraint. They think that free will means they can say whatever they want without repercussions and have no regard for those they hurt with their free will. So today, free will has become a weapon used by those in power to legitimize oppressing those they deem enemies. And this ideology spreads through the internet, through government policy, and the effects just ripple out into the world. Devastating effects that I won't outline here because I almost out of time. So, in any case, I don't think free will itself exists in the first place, but the way it's manifested today, to justify hate, to justify hitting an old lady with your leg, to justify inviting Theresa May to your committee event. All of that certainly merits regret. Thank you for listening to me.
I will now call on James Ryan, SCH.
You know the story. 6,000 odd years ago, a wily snake convinced the first humans to eat from the one tree they weren't supposed to, and thus humanity invented the whole litany of evils, from masturbation in male fashion, to the massacres of Drama, Bolivia, and Srebrenica. By the way, guys, I started reading this book about Irish history. I just got a Cromwell. I'm so sorry. That was. These days, the link between the snake and the latter tragedy is not widely recognized. But I'm glad St. Patrick was on the case. What we can say about the fall is that, if anything, it is our creation in an autonomous world, epistemically distant from the powers that may be. This autonomous world, this freedom, is bound up in our contingency. By contingency, I mean that the world can be conceived of without our existence, and anxiety is contingency made aware. Our lives are short. Statistically, a few of you in this room will not live to see 40. The more and our all honor commemorates many killed in trenches before they turned 20. Nowhere in this world is safe from danger. Neither summer homes nor tree-lined streets. Our bodies are in a state of corruption and vulnerability from birth, and most importantly, there is no necessary reason why we exist at all. But since our freedom is so absolute, any of you could take the life of any other. So, contingency elevates freedom to a perilous and exhilarating heights. And I understand freedom of the will to consist in our capacity to pursue unrestricted, genuine moral choices. For the sake of brevity, I'll prioritize this lived notion of freedom over metaphysical niceties about determinate causation, though if you're curious, they're all waiting for you on JSTOR. And I completely understand the other view. The pages of history are filled with the abuse of moral freedom and little about the right use of it. And having lost friends to suicide myself, I've often wished too that maybe if people were more limited in their freedom, not with such gravity, it would be better. But common sense tells us that once the door is open a crack, it gets kicked open from the inside. That we cannot tear evil out of the human heart, and that we must defend free will, knowing that it allows the indefensible. All I can say about God is that if he exists, he is not an economist. His goodness has nothing to do with maximizing utility. That God would create beings free in relation to him might be, as Kierkegaard said, the cross that philosophy could not carry, but remain hanging from. You're welcome, Reverend. And President Franklin Pierce, who saw his son killed before his eyes, found consolation for his suffering by believing that it had been planned against him personally by the God of love. And many people think that way, which, if anything, reveals that people prefer to fear something than the ancient about nothing. to be hurt by a free agent than by blind nature. We can see then that moral good and ethical significance cannot exist without freedom. A car may run well or poorly, but only something with a will can be good or evil, praiseworthy or blameworthy. A closer look, no moral virtue can exist without freedom and contingency. For there is no charity without poverty, nor strength without sacrifice, nor love without risk, nor courage without danger. And if we admire the visionary forebears of the Irish Republic, we do so because we think courage increases in proportion to the danger, and at the height of peril, those come face to face with our finitude and retain the resolve to act. But none of these virtues exist without real danger, real risk, and frequent confrontation with failure. Now, this, however, must seem a really paltry defense. One might respond, for example, that this would suggest that the horrors of a crime like the Holocaust are somehow balanced out by the noble but tragically few people who risk their lives to save others. Absolutely not. Because affirming free will means that these atrocities are really wrong. Notice here that to really condemn the men who carried out the Holocaust and other crimes, we must assume they were free, that they knew the moral gravity of what they were doing but chose to do it anyway. One could diminish their action with some schizophrenia of the intellect, but the assumption of fundamental human dignity not only requires that a decision are morally serious, but constitutes a precondition of moral responsibility. Robbed life of its ethical dimension, and what you have left is, as Solomon said, a vanity of vanities, a chasing after wind. And perhaps for all that means jumping into the darkness, but wouldn't it be nice to do the right thing on the way down? That our will penetrates the world, and in so doing changes it, is what forces us to leave our own heads, to express our deepest longings in art and action, music and morals. I think you find this great insight in William Wordsworth in his Intimations of Immortality. There was a time, he writes, where everything did seem a peril in celestial light, the glory and freshness of a dream. Whither is fled that visionary gleam? He, like many of us, thought that with the loss of childhood, life had become grey and tiresome. In childhood, he felt his ego was unlimited, that the whole world glowed as his being. He reflects throughout the poem on an irretrievable love from the original wound of time. But what restores him to life? From mere living to inexhaustible life, I think it is the existential attitude of moral courage. The courage that opens one's mind to nature and one's heart to the life of others, taking up the fear of non-being to an affirmation beyond mere rationality. So he says, thanks to the human heart by which we live, thanks to its tenderness, its joys and fears, to me the meanest flower that blows can give, thoughts that do often lie too deep for tears. We're entitled to regret, and I often do regret, the cost of freedom. But being grateful for life, responding to anxiety with courage because the alternative is despair, is a refusal to regret what makes us human. It's not an easy thing to do, but nothing worth doing is easy. And I'll close by saying that the pleasurable life is worth living for 20 years and the aesthetic life for 40. But it is the ethical life, and only the ethical life, that is worth living for the full 80 or 90 years I hope we all get to enjoy. Thank you.
I will now put the motion to the House. On the motion, this House regrets free will. All those in favour, please shout aye. Aye! All right. And all those against, please shout nay. Yes. All right. I think that the motion is defeated. We're going to be having some wine. It's